Good afternoon. I'm Jay Fidell, ThinkTech Hawaii, and it's the 3 o'clock block on Tuesday, and we're talking to Marco Mangelsdorf of ProVision Solar in Hilo, Hawaii. Hi, Marco. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, Jay. Great to be back with you.
Great to have you. Today on our ThinkTech Talks, we're talking about the state of solar, and Marco is a great authority on that subject. And there are a number of things to talk about that are current events in solar. One, Marco, is this chart that you sent me, and it continues on from the discussion we had last time about what appears to be a decline in solar installations in the state. Where did you get that chart? Where did the information come from? And what does it tell us?
Well, the data that you're referring to in the chart I put together is specifically looking at the PV permits, the photovoltaic system permits that were issued by the Union County of Honolulu Department of Permitting, Planning and Permitting. And that is information that's made publicly available, not quite in real time, but fairly quickly by a DPP on their website. And I work with one of my staff to be able to essentially put out all the PV permits, pull the PV permits from the spreadsheets which list all permits issued, and then tabulate them according to contractor and essentially the top. I track the top 25 PV contractors on Oahu, and then I also look at the gross totals as well. So this is information that is freely available to anyone who's willing to spend the time essentially pulling the data and organizing it into a presentable fashion.
Why do you do this, Marco?
Well, I've been in the renewable energy field now for 35 years, and although my company's focus is now pretty much strictly and only on the Big Island, we have done work, we've done projects across the state, but a year or so ago I decided just to focus exclusively on the Big Island in terms of new sales. But I still am very, very interested both in a business perspective and also from an academic perspective, what's going on across the state in terms of renewable energy, what's going on across the state in terms of photovoltaic applications. So clearly about 3/4 of the population of the state live on Oahu. That's where the main action is, so to speak, and that is a great interest to me, just to keep essentially on top of our industry and see what's going on, even though what goes on in Oahu only affects me in kind of an indirect way.
Mm-hmm. What about the neighbor islands? I mean, is the same information available from county governments in the other counties for the other islands?
Yes and no. The three other counties of Kauai, Maui, and the County of Hawaii use different databases and different programs, and it's not as easy, at least I haven't found it to be as easy to cull and collect the data, the photovoltaic system data from the other counties, although the County of Hawaii has entered in the 21st century relatively recently in terms of making their data more readily available.
Well, so tell us what does the data, at least for Oahu, have to say about the trajectory of solar in Oahu?
Well, I believe that the data shows that last year everyone recognizes, acknowledges, marvels over that last year was a beyond monster year in terms of the number of people who went solar electric across the state. Was approximately, in 1 year's worth in 2012, was more than the previous 20 years combined. And any of us, or all of us in the industry, of course, were very interested to see, well, is one monster year going to beget another monster year? And it would appear that based on at least the past 4 months, May, June, July, and August, that is not going to be the case. This year, I think, is going to continue to be a very strong year compared to the previous 2, 3, 4, 5 years in terms of PV applications and new systems sold. But it's not going to be as monster a year as last year. So this year is going to be the second busiest year in Hawaii state history in terms of PV.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what does it tell us?
Go ahead.
What does that tell us? That tells us that, any type of growth curve, especially one that was so practically exponential and going up from 2011 to 2012, that type of growth rate cannot be maintained for any length of time. And to me, it was not a question of if, but a question of when that was going to start flattening out. And this is what we're seeing over the past 4 months of this year.
So what was the factor? What factors played in making last year such a giant year? I mean, what things came together to push it that way?
I think overall that PV has become much more mainstream. It has become more commoditized, and what I mean by that is that sure, you have contractors and suppliers and manufacturers who are setting pricing, but the fact that over the past couple, 3 years, there has been a substantial oversupply of solar electric modules being produced worldwide compared to demand has led to the price of equipment dropping faster and deeper than I think anyone certainly predicted 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. So PV has become more of a commodity where some people, or perhaps some companies out there who are producing material, producing and manufacturing solar modules at or below cost, which has led to accusations of dumping and trade action between the European Union and the Chinese, the Americans and the Chinese, and so forth. So PV has just become incredibly more competitive and more of a commodity where oversupply compared to the demand has led to pricing going down much lower to allow many more people to afford it. So that, I think, is a major factor. And second, you have a number of companies who have come on the scene over the past several years who are offering photovoltaic systems to homeowners at essentially no cost. Vivint Solar out of originally Utah came on our shores March of last year, and they're number 1, number 2 in the state, and have been pretty much since they arrived. And their business model is providing people solar electric systems that essentially no upfront cost to them, where they're paying for the power produced or leasing the system over time. And that, to me, is kind of one of the great American principles of being able to get what you want when you want it, not having to pay for it.
Yeah, that's really that's great. It's sort of like the migration of car ownership to cars that you lease. You don't have to take a big hit at any one point in time. So if this is what's the name of the company again from Utah?
Vivint, V-I-V-I-N-T, Vivint Solar, and last fall they were purchased by the Blackstone Group in New York for, if I remember correctly, somewhere around $2 billion, with it be $2 billion. So Vivint doesn't just they don't just do solar; they're also into home alarm systems and home automation. So they've done fantastically well. Solar City is another one that's done well in the past 12 to 18 months. They're out of Foster City, California, and they've one of the pioneers in terms of the residential lease or the power purchase agreement model. So this just has made getting a solar electric system on one's roof just a lot easier and a lot more pain-free.
What about the public's perception of things? I mean, in order to make the market so hot the way it has been in 2012, anyway, people really got out there with their checkbooks. What's the public, mindset about this that would have so many people buying solar all at the same time?
I think, well, that's a fascinating. That's an excellent question, and it's not as if there's a definitive answer out there. But my impression is that solar electric has reached more of a mainstream persona about it, where it's considered less high tech or less technical, less rocket science, and more. This is an energy supply. This is and technology is available that has been proven now over the years to be reliable and to be not something that's going to break your bank. And I think there's a strong imitative quality that many homeowners have, that if they know of an auntie or a cousin or a neighbor or brother or someone in their extended ohana who has gone solar electric, they'll say, well, who'd you get it from, or what do you think about it? Oh, it's brought my eco bill down to $20 or something along those lines. So there's been a word of mouth, I think, that has gone a long ways to getting typical homeowners a lot more comfortable in doing it. That there's a greater confidence and a greater safety level, as far, not safety in terms of physical safety, but I'm not going to be risking my $10,000 or $20,000 or $50,000 by doing some type of harebrained scheme. I mean, it's worked for my neighbors, it's worked for my auntie, it's worked for my cousin, and gosh, I better get on board sooner rather than later, because I'm hearing things such as, well, the grid's filling up. Which is certainly much more the case now than it was 2, let alone 5 or 10 years ago. So I think there's definitely been a greater sense of urgency, and when you've got a sense of urgency, when people feel that they have to take action sooner rather than later, that creates kind of a rush to your door, and that's certainly, I feel, the way it was in 2012.
So are people concerned about the credits? I mean, is that a big part of the mindset? And let me ask also, is the mindset somehow functioned on the Vivint model of small payments instead of one large payment, of a sort of easy financing, the way that the PUC will ultimately come up with next year in on-bill financing? Is this a big factor in the decision to buy solar?
I would say so. Yes, I would say so. I mean, I'm still doing quite a bit. My company's still doing quite a bit as far as cash sales, where they're paying completely upfront with available resources, or they're getting their own loan from, whether it's Central Pacific Bank or First Hawaiian or Banco or American Savings, or even the local credit unions, which are now, I mean, if you look at the Star Advertiser these days, I mean, it's clear that the banks have gotten on board, because they're touting their own photovoltaic loan programs right now. So there's much easier routes now, much more available means to be able to finance and to get money to do your systems, whether you are paying for it yourself and getting the tax credits and financing it over a X number of years, or whether you want to just allow someone else to get the tax credits, such as Vivint or Solar City or SunPower, and let them take the credits.
It strikes me that the Vivint model and the model of financing and the bank's involvement and all that, it suggests that we've come to a level of maturity, in the sense that when you talk about the solar industry now, you're not just talking about installers or wholesalers of solar equipment. You're not just talking about the workforce that gets involved one way or the other. You're also talking about the financial industry that has grown up around solar, and it's suggested that industry is growing all the time, and that one day soon it will, the whole thing will be laid off on small monthly payments, on-bill financing, or the Vivint model, or some kind of financing arrangement where the customer never really has to write a big check.
Again, that's the great American way, that where the homeowner or the consumer doesn't have to write the big check because someone else is writing the check.
But one of the things that strikes me, though, is that all of this is happening, last year being a great year, this year being a second great year. It strikes me, though, that all of this without a storage solution, and without any resolution of the curtailment problem, which is still alive. The problem is still alive and well. Where does the lack of storage fit into this, and where does the possibility of curtailment? Is the public aware of this, or are they oblivious?
As far as curtailment, I think that is a more technical term and concept that the vast majority of possible solar consumers are not aware about. Those possible purchasers of large systems, commercial-sized systems, or systems that are utility scale, are much more necessarily have to be knowledgeable about what curtailment entails. But in terms of typical homeowners, that's not something that has affected them to date, although that that may change in the weeks and months to come. But it's not something that's been an issue to typical Hawaii homeowners at this point.
What about the storage factor? It seems to me that people, with net metering, they don't know or care much about batteries, and so they're cruising ahead regardless of, they're not actually calling for battery installations. Are you selling battery installations? Have those? What are the numbers on battery installations?
Well, in fact, Jay, very, very few. On a percentage basis, very few people who are getting grid-tie solar electric systems across the state and across the mainland are getting battery-based systems, because it is just not an option that people are seeking. The only reason you'd want a battery-based system would be to essentially back up not your entire home, but back up a handful of circuits that if and when the utility power were to go down, then your refrigerator would have power, your freezer would, or your home entertainment center and other so-called essential loads. So, but I'll share with you something interesting which came out of Southern California in the past month or so, which is, I don't remember if it was Southern Cal Edison or LA Department of Water and Power, but they are essentially going down the road of disallowing grid-tie systems which are battery-based, with the arguments that they do not know necessarily where the source of that battery power comes from. And what I mean by that is they are saying that we don't know for a fact that your batteries, and if you happen to install a battery-based system, we don't know for a fact that your batteries have been charged with nothing but PV. For all we know, they could have been charged by a backup generator, and you are charging your batteries by another means and then selling it to, or providing it into the grid and getting full retail or time of use credits, and that's an interesting argument that given a lot of people in my business grief if that were to move over here.
Oh, gee whiz. It takes a clever fellow to do that, eh?
Right. Lots of clever people, the utilities.
Absolutely true. Well, just before we leave the subject of the numbers you got, the data you got on the number of installations, can you give me your feeling on where it is going to go for the rest of 2013, and what kind of a year 2014 is going to be for solar installations in Oahu?
Sure. My prediction is that as of this month, the total number of PV permits issued on Oahu for the first 9 months of this year will be below the first 9 months of last year. In other words, that the lines are going to cross where they will continue in the direction for the rest of the year of overall fewer PV permits issued on Oahu, and most likely by extrapolation across the rest of the state. There will be fewer PV permits issued, fewer projects in 2013 than in 2012. What's going to go on in 2014, I think that trend will most likely continue. The legislature in Honolulu will no doubt take up for the third or fourth time consecutively the issue of the state tax credits for solar. They failed to come up with something in conference committee in early May that a lot of people were hoping they would come up with a new bill that would make it to the governor's desk, but that did not happen. So I think 2014 will certainly be impacted whether the legislature is able to come up with a bill that they're able to pass on to the governor. So that's certainly a factor. Just as big a factor, if not bigger, is the grid saturation issue, which HECO came out with a press release last Friday, I believe it was, and my friend Alan did a good piece in the Star Advertiser explaining it, I thought, very, very well. But the fact is, because you mentioned battery storage or some type of storage, is that for the peak hours of demand here in the state, which are typically in the 7 to 9 evening hours when there's no sun that's shining, is that solar doesn't really help with those peaks until we have some type of massive or substantial battery storage. But the grid saturation one is something that's got a lot of people's attention, and I for one believe that the utility companies are really doing a lot and putting a substantial effort into trying to see just how much more they can take, and as far as distributed generation. And it's a conundrum that does not have, in my opinion, or at least the people I've spoken to over the months and years, it does not have a ready-to-go, off-the-shelf, cost-effective, large-scale solution. I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on there when people talk about smart grids and means to integrate more solar, but it's not something that appears to me to be immediately available to mitigate these saturated circuits that are showing up on our islands with a greater frequency.
Yeah, is there a way to tell when the saturation, becomes a brick wall? Do we have the science? Do we have the modeling, the computer analysis to tell exactly when you got to say no?
Well, I think we're pretty much there. I should say, from what I can tell, the eco companies are pretty much there in terms of they have appeared to draw the line at a threshold of essentially 100% of what they call the minimum daytime load of any given circuit. So once there is an equivalent of 100% of the minimum daytime load, measured load for that particular circuit, 100% equivalent in installed PV or some other type of distributed generation, at that point they're saying, look, we have reached a point where we have to give very serious consideration as to the effect this is going to have on our grid and its reliability and being able to maintain grid stability. And this is this 100% minimum daytime load threshold has been reached in circuits across the states. And
so
I do believe, and of course Hiko would be much more knowledgeable about speaking to this particular subject in detail, but I believe that they are working hard and fast and diligently to see what they can do to go beyond 100%. But are there available solutions that they have ready to trot out and pull out of a 40-foot container and slap them on a particular circuit? I don't think so. So they are drawing the line to some extent at that 100%. And where we go from here is
I can tell you where we go from here. We're going to take a short break. That's where we go. Sorry, Marco. That's Marco Mangelsdorf, Provision Solar in Hilo. We're having a ThinkTech talk with him. We're talking about the state of solar, as we like to do with him every now and then. And we'll be right back after this short break. Aloha, this is Jay Fidell. ThinkTech and the Hawaii Venture Capital Association put on monthly luncheon panel programs at the Plaza Club here in Pioneer Plaza. Our program this time is on September 26th. It's called Solar in Hawaii. We're going to examine the solar industry and see what's in it for the long haul. We have a great panel, great moderator. We'll be sending out email on this. If you want to be in our email list to receive the details, check out thinktechhawaii.com. In any event, you can sign up for the program at hvca.org. Thanks. See you there. This is Jay Fidell. Mahalo. We're back. We're live. This is ThinkTech Talks. We're talking about the state of solar with Marco Mangelsdorf at Provision Solar in Hilo by telephone. Marco, I'd like to talk a little about the course you're teaching, which I find fascinating, and I hope you can tell our viewers and listeners about it. It's called Politics and Energy. Where are you teaching that? Why are you teaching that? And what are you teaching in that?
Well, I am teaching it this semester at the University of Hawaii Hilo. Why am I teaching it? I have had an interest in energy and energy-related issues and politics and challenges for over 30 years, and along with my working in the renewable energy field for that period of time, my other career track has been pursuing various degrees, and I got my PhD in political science a number of years ago from the University of California, and I'm fortunate enough to live in a part of the state where there is a four-year state university. So I had long thought about trying to put together a college course curriculum looking at energy and energy issues, both from a technical, economic, environmental, geostrategic perspectives, and offer it to my local political science department. And I was fortunate enough to get my foot in the door, 8 or 9 years ago in the political science department here as a part-timer. So essentially, I I have the opportunity to kind of teach when I want, which is really nice because I do have my full-time day job. It's not something I could do anything close to on a full-time basis. So I actually went on sabbatical a couple years ago, and I went to China and Tibet for 2 months to learn Chinese and just to kind of take a step back from working and directing ProVision for the years that I have. And I used that time to put together this course, which was a very interesting intellectual academic exercise to try to take something as broad and diffuse as energy and politics and come up with something that was going to fit a 16-week college curriculum. So
well, one of the things that strikes me is, certainly anybody associated with energy in the state of Hawaii would agree with you as a matter of principle that politics and energy are inextricably intertwined, especially, in the transformative process. You can't do anything without government. Much as we'd like to, we can't. But the question I would put to you is, is the course limited to Hawaii? Are there basic, are there fundamental truths in the relationship between politics and energy that are worldwide or nationwide that you can teach?
Well, in fact, what I decided to do, Jay, is go from the micro to the macro. So I start off with an introduction of what the course is going to be about, and then since a lot of the students haven't had much of a basic exposure to basic energy concepts and physics, I spent some time essentially educating them on what energy is, what it does, what the history of the science has been, going back from people like Aristotle to Isaac Newton to, of course, Albert Einstein.
Oh, that's great.
And a whole slew of others to give them some scientific and kind of historical background. And then I focus on what's most apparent and affecting us here in the Aloha State, which is, of course, what's going on in Hawaii energy-wise. So I'm actually doing that part of the course right now. So I am fortunate enough to have my friend Jay Ignacio, who's going to come speak to my class tomorrow. Jay is a really great guy.
For a long time, yeah?
He's president of HELCO.
Okay.
And another guest speaker is my friend Russell Ruderman, who is state senator now, Russell Ruderman, who represents Puna, and he's been very interested in energy politics as well, with geothermal, of course, in Puna. So I've been able to find a number of really great friends and colleagues who've been very kind to come and speak to my class, or will be very kind to come and speak to my class. So,
oh, this sounds like a great course. I hope you can share more about the specific sessions with us as it goes forward. But tell us about the curriculum. I mean, what are you covering? How have you divided up this body of material? What's the progression of the course?
Well, after Hawaii, then I go to U.S. energy politics, which, of course, there's no shortage of information from so many different perspectives and so many different angles to look at U.S. energy politics. From U.S. energy politics, I look at a number of specific energy sources, and just for information, if you look at the top 4 energy sources on the planet in order in terms of how much energy as a percentage of the 100% energy pie on the planet is used, number 1 is oil, number 2 is natural gas, number 3 is coal, and then in the number 4 position is nuclear. So I spend time looking at all 4 of those energy sources specifically and kind of follow them from where they start, whether it's pulling stuff out of the ground or enriching uranium to be able to split atoms to get heat and power. So I look at those 4 specific energy sources. I also look at renewables, and then I just wanted to spend some time looking at China, because I've had a fair amount of exposure to Chinese politics and Chinese energy issues over the past years, and the Chinese are the number one consumer of energy on the planet. They surpassed the U.S. 2 years ago, although the U.S. is still the number 1 consumer of oil products on the planet. The Chinese use more energy on a total basis than any other nation on the planet. So I spend a week or so looking at China, and then I decided, as a change from when I taught the course 2 years ago, I decided to look at the proposition that is the continued increase in consumption of energy resources, is that inevitable as the world economy continues to grow. In other words, as there are more and more people on the planet, which of course there have been historically, which has led to more and more economic activity, which has led to more wealth essentially per capita on a mass basis, and that has led as well to more and more energy being used on a gross basis and also on a per capita basis. I'm talking on a world level, on a global level. But when you've got a planet that certainly has finite capabilities or finite assets and resources, and nobody can really dispute that, and a planet that has a biosphere which is becoming more and more impacted by all those coal plants that are being built each and every week in China in order to provide them with their seemingly insatiable need for more and more and more and more and more power. Is there some way where there can be some type of healthy, steady-state economy that is not predicated on limitless growth? Because if you go back through the past several hundred years of economic theories, even going back to Adam Smith in the late 1700s, David Ricardo in the early 1800s, John Maynard Keynes, and even Karl Marx and Karl Engels back in the late 1800s, it was all predicated or assumed that there would be essentially limitless growth in an economy. You can debate over the justice of those assets and those resources being spread out to a large group of people or a narrow group, but the assumption has always been that there were essentially no limits to growth. And that, in our day and age, is simply no longer the case. So I'm going to be spending the last several weeks of the course essentially addressing these questions, which I don't have an answer to. Others, certainly brighter than I have written about them and thought about them, but is it possible to move in the direction of a more steady-state economy that is not predicated on ever more constant quantitative economic growth? Because that type of continuing quantitative economic growth predicated on using more and more resources and more energy is simply not sustainable.
Oh, what a great discussion. It goes beyond just the connection between politics and energy. It goes to everything. But I wanted to ask you. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I wanted to ask you, a question which could be very sophisticated, but it also could be naive. I'm not sure, but I'd like your reaction. In your studies in Hawaii and national and global issues around the relationship of politics and energy, is it that politics drive energy, or is it that energy is increasingly driving politics?
I would say it's a loop. How's that for an answer?
A good answer.
They feed off of each other. I mean, there is no more impactful thing that we as human beings do on the planet other than simply being here in greater and greater numbers, and right now it's somewhere in the 7 billion range.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I looked at a population growth chart not too long ago, and starting in sometime, I think it was 1950s, 1 billion people have been added to the planet's population more or less once every 13 to 14 years.
That's not sustainable.
Which is not sustainable and has really taken off in J-curve-like fashion over the past 50 or 60 years. But other than simply being more and more of us on the planet, there is no more impactful thing that we as a species do to ourselves and to our biosphere than the procurement and production of and extraction of, transportation of, fighting over, and consumption of energy resources. So I think that's something that is certainly worth more discussion and worth more study. And I'll just share this little vignette with you. I went to one of my first energy conferences back in December of 1980 at the Sheraton Hotel in Waikiki. And there was U.S. Senator Mark Matsunaga was there, and Frank Fozzi, and then Governor George Ariyoshi. And so much of what they were saying 33 years ago is what the current politicians are saying now, in terms of Hawaii could act as a showcase for renewable energy. We have all these resources. We should be doing more. We are so vulnerable and isolated out here. This is an imperative. And I asked myself, well, gee, so much of this sounds so familiar over the past decades. So what actually have we accomplished? How much have we accomplished in the past 33 years?
Well, that brings me to the whole question of Neil Abercrombie's recent comment on the undersea cable, that he backs it, and you wonder if that's what part of the loop that's at. Is that the part of the loop that will happen or not?
Well, I've long thought about the proposed cable that it's really going to come down to who's paying for it. And if we had Senator Daniel Kianoy, who is still our senator, even in these tough budget times, I wouldn't leave it past him to be able to find some federal money, $1 to $2 billion, to be able to pull it off. But with all due respect to the hardworking senators Brian Schatz and my friend Mazie Hirono, they're not Daniel Kianoy, and finding federal money to that tune to be able to finance a undersea cable is probably not coming anytime soon. So who's going to pay for it, Jay? Is it going to be the ratepayers? Is it going to be David Murdoch of Castle and Cook? Is it going to be some other consortium? I don't know. I mean, that to me is a huge question.
That is probably the biggest question. I mean, is after you get through the political pushback. But wonder in the years to come, you could call your course politics, economics, and energy.
Well, it's certainly intertwined.
Let's move to the program on September 26th. We only have a few minutes left. This is a program that ThinkTech and the Hawaii Venture Capital Association and the Hawaii Energy Policy Forum are all putting on at the Plaza Club. It's our monthly this time. Mike Gabbard, Senator Mike Gabbard of the Senate Energy Committee will open. Leslie Cole Brooks of the Hawaii Solar Energy Association will be the moderator. Commissioner Mike Champley and the PUC will be on the panel. Mark, your colleague Mark Duda will be on the panel. Your colleague Riley Saito and Scott Sue of Hawaiian Electric Company, an up and coming for sure, will be on the panel. So the topic is solar in Hawaii, very close to the topic of our discussion today. And an examination of the industry and how the industry as a whole is doing, where the industry is going. Have you thought about what you're going to say? Can you give us a précis on your remarks that you'll make 2 weeks from now, Marco?
Well, first of all, I mean, other than myself, I think you were able to line up a really spectacular all-star panel, Jay. So my hats off to you for lining up some of the true dedicated, smart, and interesting people who are going to be speaking on that particular panel. So who knows what's going to happen in the state over the next couple weeks? I mean, there seems to be news almost every week as far as this or that issue or topic that comes up. So we may have a whole bunch of new things to talk about in a couple weeks. But I'm just going to be very interested to hear, especially what Scott Sue has to say. I think he's a really good guy, and with the departure of our friend Robbie Alm, I believe that the VPs who are there at HECO now will be essentially having to step up their game, since Robbie was such a big and positive presence over there for HECO for so many years. So I think Scott's one of those people who is definitely going to be making a substantial difference in the months and years to come at HECO. So I'm going to be really interested to hear what Scott has to say.
Yeah, a lot of people.
Mike,
go ahead.
Mike Gabbard, who's the chair of the Energy Committee on the Senate side. He's also just a really, really great guy and very dedicated to seeing the right thing happen here in the state in terms of more renewables and less dependent on imported fuels. And Champley as well. Champley, I have come to know as well personally, and I think very highly of him. So I just really look forward to hearing what other people have to say, who will bring, I think, a very thoughtful and very well thought out perspective to these important issues.
I forgot to mention there's one other panelist. He's on our materials. I forgot to write his name down, and that is Joe Saturnia, your colleague with Island Pacific Energy. And I'll give you an advance on this. I believe he's going to bring with him his new battery storage system that he's been developing and just rolled out last week.
Sure,
you've seen it? You've heard about it?
Yes, I think he calls it his the Empower, EMPOWER, the Empower system that he's come up with.
He's actually going to bring it to the program so everybody can look at it.
No, that would be great. Maybe you can power all the power needs there.
Marco, it's been great talking with you as always. I hope we can do this again and again. It's always so informative to talk with you, and I look forward to seeing you on the 26th for the program Solar in Hawaii at the Plaza Club. That's Marco Mangelsdorf, Provision Solar in Hilo. This is ThinkTech Talks. We're talking about the state of solar, and we are learning a lot, as we always do with Marco. Thank you, Marco.
Thank you very much, Jay. Always great to be with you.
Aloha.